literary organizer founded in 2017. Asemana Books is dedicated to elevating voices that transcend borders with a particular focus on West Asian and North African diasporic communities. Through publishing, translation, and community programming, Asemana works to amplify underrepresented voices, foster critical dialogue, and connect diverse audiences across Canada and beyond. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered today. Asemana Books operates on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Wendat peoples. This land is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to read, write, and connect through words in this land. We would also like to note that today's event is being video recorded and will be shared via the Asemana Books YouTube channel like the previous guide. Today we are honored to launch Where Words Defeat Bullets, an anthology poems for the Iranian people, and the 2026 Uprising compiled by Mansour Noorbakhsh. This powerful collection, many of you know, the origin of it goes back to February 15th, when 18 poets, prominent Canadian poets, joined us here in this same space, and they had a session, and following that session, more poets, I think another around 20 poets joined us to make up with a book of 38 poems from international one, diasporic, Canadian, and many poets from Europe. And Mansour John has compiled a remarkable book that talks across borders, languages, and generations, offering poetry as a form of witness, solidarity, and resistance. And I'm very glad that today, again, 17 poets are coming, joining us to share their new poems, their reflections on the case of Iran. It is now my great pleasure to invite the compiler of this anthology, Mansour Noorbakhsh, to open the readings. Mansour Noorbakhsh, author of In Search of Shared Wishes, Uprising Press, Till You Recognize Me, Mosaic Press, and How the Readings, Mosaic Press, member of the Ontario Poetry Society, the Writers Union of Canada, and League of Canadian Poets. He has presented the contemporary Canadian poets and the world poets in a weekly Persian radio from 2020 to 2024. Please join me in welcoming Mansour.
Thank you, Mahdi. Thank you, and thank you, Canada, for providing this opportunity, a peaceful opportunity to share our words here. So, we know the book now we have in our hands, born from a poetry gathering in this very room, held on February 15th, as Mahdi said, and you all have been here, you read your poetry, and now we have it in the book, and also after that, other poets from Canada and some poets from other countries joined us and shared their poems, which are included here. I think at least I need to read the names, and for those which are not from Canada, I'll also say the country, but the others which don't say country, obviously they are from Canada. Albert Moritz, Bruce Mayer, Susan Kozapolsky, Bruce Hunter, Mark McAlister, Olga Stein, Strom, Peter Gay Nash, Keith Garebian, Diana Manole, Patrick Connors, Patricia Keeney, Brenda Clews, Campbell, John Oughton, Peter Taylor, Josephine Dore, Ivy Iskov, Lin Zhu, Miriam Leroux, Hiram Leroux, Sylvia Pater from Australia, Claudia Pacino from Italy, Emil Nicolae from Romania, Josie Dishasha Andrews, Elizabeth Barnes, Ilana Wolf, Mahdi Ganjavi, Nabiza Chraisha from Zimbabwe, Niels Hau from Denmark, Richard Harrison, Eva Petropoulou Liano from Greece, Antje Stein from Germany, Stephen Kent Romy, P.J. Yukon, Kelly Carr, Chris Vanamaker, Anne Sorby, and George Eliot Clark. Thank you all, and thanks to Asemana. Just a point I need to mention it here. Two people which are close to me, they pointed it out, and also two colleagues of my wife, they have pointed it to her. So I thought that it could be a question for other people, and we need to clarify it at least one time and make it clear. This book and all these activities, which are cultural activities, are the labor of love. There is no fundraising after this, or no organization has funded this activity. And personally, I think it is my responsibility, it's my duty to do this kind of activities voluntarily for the people which they don't have any voice. And we should, it is a must to be their voice. It is what I think and what I do. And the cost of the book, I believe, and as I have spoken to Mahdi, because of the limited number of books which will be sold, it's just to cover the cost of publication. And so thank you to Mahdi Ganjavi and to Asemana Books for expediting the publication, and now we have a beautiful book in our hand. So now we know this book is an anthology of poems for the Iranian people and the 2026 uprising. We know what has happened during last January in Iran. The brutal, criminal, and cruel regime of Iran shut down the internet and shut down all communication networks and killed people, innocent people who were just in the street to raise their voice and ask and demand their needs for many years. And we don't know how many have been killed, and certainly the number is very big. And after that, they have also killed people in the prison, and that's what they have done before. And the depth of this tragedy could be felt when we remember that repressive forces even entered hospitals or killed the injured protesters with a second shot in the streets. And it was not the first time that the regime showed its cruelty. They shut down the flight PS-752, as we know, and perished all passengers, innocent passengers, and innocent crews. Anytime that Iranian people have raised their voice to demand their rights, like in 2022, the regime has killed the protesters in the street and in the prisons, and have tried to slaughter their voice. Writers, poets, filmmakers, environmental advocates, and other cultural voices have long been targeted, silenced, and murdered by this regime, both in prisons and in their own homes. And also, there is a good news that Sai will share it with us. Two poet and writers, Iranian poet and writers who have been in prison are released, and that we have a section in this book written by Sai about the works, and the names are Ali Asadullahi and Ali Reza Adine. And beside this book and the part which is written by Sai in this book, we have signed a letter prepared by PEN Canada with many other Canadian writers, and supported these two Iranian writers. And we are very happy that these two writers eventually are released from the prison. Sai will explain it better, and will read some poems and essays from these two writers. And also, I'm pleased that Albert is here and has accepted to be our literary host. So I'll be very quick, very short, and because we have a limited time in this room, and we have a huge enthusiasm for listening to our poets. I think we can just skip the short bios. The bios of the writers are in the book. So, and also I believe the bios are available in the websites and many other places. And also, in addition to that, we all are familiar with our voices, so we know the poets. Al will, after his own reading, at the middle of this session, before we go for a short break, and also again give us some literary comments on this book. And almost at the end of this session, Al will also share some thoughts on this book and some literary comments. So I won't take you all much waited for this. Let's get started, and we start our readings with Albert Moritz. No,
You'll come back.
Yeah, I'll just call them. I just said that it's not necessary to read the short bios, and we leave that time, we'll give that time to the poets for reading as much as they are available for today.
Thanks, Mansour. Well, thanks for the opportunity to participate, and including this way, not merely with a poem, but also with a couple of short talks, and they will be very short, okay? but I think they'll concentrate on the continuity of the problem. Now we know it goes way, way back, and it has taken since February 18th and our original togetherness here and reading that led to this book, one huge dogleg. You know, now it is, the crisis is transformed into something else, or another crisis laid on top of and contributing to the original one. So that's something to think about a little bit too. I say that much about what I'll be thinking about, talking about here, just to say that this introduces my poem about Iran today. And so I'm not to read the one I put in the book, I did last time, but a new one, and the new one for me couldn't help but take into account recent and ongoing events. Let's put it that way. So you might call this just a voice from Iran, sort of. And I'll make a small comment on it at the end. Calculatedly, you called it good-heartedly, heroically, with a fat eye on publicity, you carefully, to avoid my family, bombed my evil neighbor. He wasn't there. You killed my sister and brother. So now I will hate you forever. Here's what would be fair, if anything now can be fair. Lock yourself in a chamber until you discover how to restore my loves alive to me. Reverse your war, and if you never can bring them back, then die and rot in there, so we hear from you no more. So that's my poem of today, and I feel as if the most important thing about the current war is the schoolgirls killed on the first day of the war, and nothing else about it ought to be even ever mentioned by anybody, any journalist and so on, until that is harped on and somebody is made to pay, and it's made to be the great event of recent times, killing schoolgirls by accident. Ridiculous.
Thank you, Al. Yes, there are lots of disasters, and war is always disastrous, and each war makes more disasters after that, and even for generations and generations after the generations which are involved in the war. So now, the poet laureate of Stratford, David Strom.
Yes, thank you very much, Mansour. I recently wrote a poem called Where to Find My Poems. One place you will not find them, unfortunately, is in Where Words Defeat Bullets. I missed the call for submissions, but recently a literary journal in southwestern Ontario issued a call for submissions that I thought touched on everything I despise in the world today. So I wrote a poem about it called, of course, Call for Submissions. Call for Submissions touched on everything that eats my sleep, the way things burn, the way things seep, our worship of the elusive blue checkmark, the avatar shields that bleed the person out, apps for everything except the human heart, blue-suited sycophants dancing on the rosy tip of annihilation, that fat red nipple tease of a button, just one more insult away. The careless Gatsbys and their little misses, snorting coke and caviar, while our planet burns and children roam the village bloated, wearing smoke for clothing in this depleted world where peace is now commoditized and sold to the knee-band bidder with the most convincing grovel. We edit the corrosion out of history now, remove the blood with our creative blotters of reinvention, and will our world into what works for us, while behind the curtain, the needles whisper love into tattooed arms, and the 1%ers backslap the victory bull to the closing bell. Purchases are now our gods, though Canada's most famous stripes writhe upon the discount table. We're click counters now, hashtag hooers, who measure friends by user profile, cliched cuties whacking words like weeds into mindless memes and condensations, not seeing that love with a U is not even close to the same thing. Yeah, this call for submission stings my chords, I guess. An 8-year-old recently told me that poetry is the simple act of writing down what you care about. And I suppose that's what I've done here. Darkened the page with the bruises and truths I wish I saw no reason to write. The second poem, some of you know I do one-man shows and whatnot, perform with violins and cellos and pianos and whatnot. And I was working on a show recently called Expressions of Love. And I had written this particular poem called Zippers. And I said to the guys, I guess I can't include it because it's not a love poem. And they said, yes, it is. It is a love poem. So I did include it in the show. And I gotta say, it stopped the show. I got a standing ovation in the middle of the show. It's called Zippers. And it's on the topic of how so many wars, so many causes of conflict are caused by territorial disputes. Who owns what, where, when? Zippers. We zipper in, zipper out, divide, bisect, rule in, rule out, borders and stanchions, the moats and guardrails of the human heart. Restrict, forbid, segment. We rope off even the water, the Marali Biram, with its scars of jurisdictional seas and laneways. Einsatz verboten. We float above the hash marks, seeking friendly skies and a place to take us in. Bollards and hedgerows, blockades and barriers. Oh, we've mastered the art of walls, blistered this partition paradise with the barbed wire of defended edges, red lines and rhetoric, marked our territory with the cat piss of arrogance and blinkered ambition. This is mine and that is yours. A planet pixelated into endless islands of fortified ownership we apparently value more than people's lives. I say these things to my neighbor as we lean across the garden fence, respectful of the line between us, the land of the other. All these little lives, and all these little houses, and all the worrying inside this microscopic weeping world that zipper us together, yet keep us so far apart. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And now, Bonnie Iskov, the founder of the Ontario Poetry Institute.
Thank you, Mansour. Thank you for this book. What can I say? I'm deeply honored to be a part of it. And I know that Ilana Wolf wished she could have been here today to help commemorate this event. Unfortunately, she is observing decided she's very orthodox. So first I would like to read her poem, and then I will read mine. So Ilana Wolf's poem, A Pure Anticipation. We couldn't wait. We waited. We feared to act. We acted. Action was required, and a pure anticipation. Voices in the millions risen, wakened to a knowing, feeling, consciousness, accessible across translations, all. We're fed by the momentum and unwilling to relent, but we are able to prevail against the weapons of state. Say promise, say there's rightfulness, say agency, say urgency, say sky is listening, nigh, say earthly light, say saint, say Saint Anaphora, and say it like a mantra. Say apostrophe, apostrophe. Say wind, say whipping wind, say what can't be said enough of now. Well, when I wrote this, Kamiani unfortunately was still alive, and although I don't think it would make a difference if he would have died earlier or if he would have died later, I think the regime is still, there are too many of them waiting in the wings to take over and murder as many as they can. So I wrote this poem a while ago, and when I wrote it at the time, Kamiani was not in the poem. But I had a lovely Persian girl who was head of our security in our condo. And I shared the poem with her, and she said, well, Kamiani's missing. And I asked her, where would I put him? She showed me where to put him in the poem, and now he's here. Thank God, only in spirit. And maybe rot, his spirit rot, you know where. Okay. Rumor has it, I pore over the print, digest nauseating news. These terrorist days, every staggering story proves volatile. Rumor has it I work inside a cubicle, concealed under wraps, alongside history books, with compatible companions sticking to their cell phones. We discover the repetition at our feet, Hitler and Kamiani, with equal disgust. Moving from the gray matter of fact to a bomb shelter on the lakefront covered with black cloth keeps me from staying home. But this is no dry run. I return at moonrise and wash up on a sheltered shore. My collaborators believe I hold the pencil like a knife, but they only whisper the reality. Any woman apologizing on her knees is never at a loss for words and should be held responsible for the gossip. It is my custom to wrestle with injustice, set myself on a mad course to organize nouns and verbs and eggshells, maybe even broken glass. I don't fantasize a happy solution. Jews and dogs and good Christian children are all susceptible to the same fate. Brute creation demands this. Ask any executioner holding a gun. Just to say, we are all endangered. We are all endangered, and we all need to love each other and take care of each other.
Come and join community health workers. Auditorium at 2 o'clock. That is a guided conversation about harm reduction with community health workers. With refreshments at 2 o'clock in the auditorium. All are welcome.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yes, that's true. And there is no better way than just loving each other. We cannot protect each other from the cruel people, from the cruel regimes, but we can just protect each other by our words. And now, a feminist, maybe at some point, but a human rights activist for sure, and a dedicated writer, certainly. Olga Stein.
I am a fan. Okay. I'm not going to read my poem that's in the book. I'm going to read a poem, or maybe two if there's time, from my collection called Love Songs, Prayers to Gods Not Men. It is about love, and there are a lot of poems in there which are also about love, although they may not be about love on the surface. So I'm going to read you a poem called The Disappeared Poet, because I think it's very much about words defeating bullets. And I just want to say in advance, there are two omissions right at the start of the poem. You can fill them in. They are omissions because they apply so universally to so many cases, tragically. And by the way, this poem was originally written for Mbizo Chirasha, who disappeared, the Zimbabwe poet whose poem is in this book. He disappeared for something like over a year, and we were all very worried about him. So initially it was dedicated to him, but now it's dedicated for all those courageous enough to stand up to tyranny. The Disappeared Poet. He is believed to have been killed by nationalist forces in the midst of the civil war in. She was last seen being removed from her home, accused of incitement against. Against a regime without tolerance for truth. So you know, I have become an obsessive collector of scraps of news, grim signs and omens, as well as voluble declarations of support and internet links that lead me to volatile places and murky politics where dissidents sink out of sight. I tell myself, a poet isn't a shadow, a barely there shimmer in the distance. We hear the poet speak and feel a solid presence in the words we see, even with eyes shut. Confounded, I look for answers and picture a man or woman at a desk or by a window, focused on a page or staring into the distance. But there, in that offshore refuge, this quiet gaze materializes hopes and fears. And though they utter truths, such honest private exposés, is art, not reportage, we say. The world has changed. This is no cloak and dagger flick, nor Cold War Havana, and poets aren't malicious spooks to be hunted, or like Juan Gelman, the Argentine, callously banished. Berlin has been made whole again. Stalin's reign is over, although the night of murdered poets haunts us still. A poet can't be disappeared without reverberations felt worldwide. You see, in the West, where we think ourselves free, we cannot fathom the sudden absence or whiteout of disappearance, or imagine erasure without a headline, public disclosure, or open letter. This isn't fascist Spain, we repeat, recalling Lorca, and point out that Chile's bogeyman is also dead, and Victor Jara was avenged when, after all these years, Pinochet's henchmen were convicted of murder. We praise those with courage enough to speak, Václav Havel, Nelson Mandela, among others, but poets, you hear, don't aim to don the vestments of party leaders. Instead, they pick up the mantles of other poets. The gentlest of visionaries, poets are solitary people and the most unlikely crusaders. Their words are lodestars or salves that soothe bruised souls. Nor can poets be made to disappear, know this. For their writing survives and will resurface like ancient scripts that speak to future generations, like beacons in the distance whose truths won't be dimmed or silenced, however brutally and blindly some may try. And this little paragraph from the Beltway Poetry Quarterly, which was published on May 20th, 21, SOS for Poets, an open letter. This letter is a cry, and it's a quote, "This letter is a cry for attention, a cry to fellow humans, including poets all over the world, in Myanmar and Colombia, Sri Lanka, and everywhere that words have been silenced, hearts stopped, brains bashed in. Why poets? Poets without borders, poets as witnesses, poets writing in the face of tyranny, saying no." Is there time for another poem? It's a longish poem.
Yeah.
You sure?
Yeah, for sure.
And this poem was actually written in 2022 when we were witnessing the calamity in Ukraine. And it's called The Living. Is writing poetry barbaric now? How is it that humans are herded from homes, shipped across borders? The dead are abundant while hearses are scarce. Abandoned in cellars and roadsides, unearthed, bloated in collapsed theaters and malls. Grief abounds, flooding cities and towns in waves, or speeding or seeping in like acrid gray vapor into bunkers and makeshift beds. There are no gods, but grief is known, visible, felt, like stones in the mouth and throat, the eyes in mourning, an ominous growth fingered at the back of the neck. Grief isn't metaphysical, nor quantifiable. It goes without saying and can't be belied. There is proof in collapsed walls of schools, hospitals, large black craters, the smell of burning, stooped bodies, children bereft of fathers, and nightmares. Gray-black shrouds of grief envelop towns. After fallen shells, missiles, and bombs, the impersonal rippers do their grim mass collections. These aren't the deeds of gods. Who needs gods? Grief is man-made, like pestilence. Sorry. Pathogenic agents are men, pressing buttons with numbed fingers, detached eyes unseeing like zombies. Dying happens to the living, in real bedrooms, kitchens, basements, or sidewalks in green squares. Death is not elsewhere, in another realm. There are no gods, yet the perps are human. Those who kill indiscriminately or rape girls and women are the undead, soulless, doomed to wander aimlessly in bleak nowhereness, in dead zones of alcohol or drug-induced stupors. There are no gods. Myths are told by men. Still, in pivotal battles, there are the living, with steel enough to counter a scourge, move others using words to instill courage, the promise of immortality. Even Achilles knew undying glory could be won. It came down to strategy, faith, brawn, and grace that could be hewn from valor, not rank brutality. Thank you.
Thank you, Olga. Yeah, it's interesting that when we point to any war, it just reminds us another one, and all calamities and all disasters are very similar. And now, if you wanted to hear to someone who paints very vivid pictures, images, very vivid pictures, images, by words, very delicately, Patrick Connors.
Thank you, Mansour. Thank you, Mahdi. It's an honor and a privilege to be able to speak today in front of so many friends and like-minded people. What I had to say the last time, I'm going to try to not get too Marxist here, but more than ever, we cannot allow just the United States to be the people who are going to be trying to free the beautiful people of Iran from the regime. They lost all credibility when they said that they were going to blow up an entire civilization. This is the poem that I wrote for this Vantage, which Mahdi honored me by publishing this week on the Asemana magazine. Bombs. The epigraph from it is from one of my heroes, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. True peace is not merely the absence of tension, it is the presence of justice. The bombs prefer to drop at night because they don't like to be seen before they are felt. It doesn't make sense that bombs would be afraid when they don't even know the people they kill. Many bombs have been dropped in the name of justice, but justice gives safety, freedom, and courage. Justice is a creative force which nurtures. Bombs only know how to destroy. Some people like bombs. They especially like when bombs are far away. They somehow don't realize that a bomb dropped anywhere means that none of us are safe. When the last bomb has dropped, and those who dropped them have lost their power, there will be no more need for weapons, because justice will belong to us all. Thank you.
Sure, justice belongs to all of us, or us all. Patricia Keeley cannot attend this gathering because she said she feels unwell, probably sick. I hope she gets well soon. And now, the voice of a true migrant, if I say, true voice, true acting, and through making a connection between two different cultures with different views. Diana Manole. You are?
Hello, everyone. Although it's a it's a sad, a tragic reason that brought us together here. I'm honored to share this event with all of you, and I am happy to see friends. I decided to read poems about poets because I will always believe that poetry can change the world, that words can defeat poets. And I will read 3 short poems, very short, I promise, which were inspired by other poets or writers. The first one was inspired by a poet I was in love with, who died, but I still admire his work. It's called Colonizing Stories. Friends from all over the world question my right to tell stories of another race. But I stubbornly keep writing about you, writing in silence, in tacky 2-star hotel rooms, in the 2 hemispheres. You carve words directly in your skin, like a monk
performing acts of penance for the sins of others. The blood in suspicious stains that you got used to not seeing, dripping like a Chinese water torch, drop by drop into the pile of the carpet, changing you from victim to self-executioner. The pain spreads through the air with the lusty smell of African flowers, still waiting to be catalogued by the Royal Horticultural Society. Your syllabus slipped into my syllabus, inseminating them. An intercourse that lacks the least tenderness, like an in vitro fertilization where the end justifies the means. You write, hunchbacked over the table, full of wonder, like a first grader still struggling to understand the meaning of each letter. When the angel comes, its color doesn't matter. And this is from Praying to a Landed Immigrant, which after 3 long years has become available on Amazon in a very cheap Kindle edition, if you are interested. The print is sold out. The second poem, and they get shorter and shorter, is inspired by a writer whom I think a lot of you know and love, Darcy Friesen-Hossack. We had a Zoom call. We never met in person. And she said that she was an accidental poet. And the poem, if you know them, it's about Marianne Moore's poetry, and Wisława Szymborska, The Joy of Writing. To Darcy. Oh, and it was just published in Hong Kong, in version 5. You know it. Accidental poets dislike poetry. Don't read it, nor listen to it. They are practical people who don't believe that toads can live in pretend gardens. They don't grieve when make-believe hunters gun down fantasy does. The joy of writing escapes them as they treat words like in telegrams. Each one is charged. 99 cents per word, $18.95 for up to 100. Accidental poets don't see prophecies in ink stains growing on their bedding sheets and believe in dry cleaning. They've learned in grade 12 physics that the God particle is the Higgs boson, nicknamed for the sake of mass media ratings. They see heaven and hell as the two sides of a Mobius band and can admire what they don't understand. Conspiracy theories exclude. When reality overwhelms them, they twist a corkscrew in their imaginary wounds until poems burst out in blood.
Good afternoon, everyone. Section will be happening on the second floor in the auditorium today at 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Everyone's invited.
It's short. Thank you. And the last poem was inspired by what, she is one of the most important Romanian poets. And she turned 94 and is still writing. So, Yorai for all of us. Nora Iuga, and I translated 2 of her poetry books. The Misunderstanding. The next door neighbor asks me to pray together for the welfare of the humankind. She doesn't believe I've long forgotten the Lord's Prayer. She gives me a book of prayers and tells me to read the text from it. She doesn't believe I can see well because of my cataract. She starts praying and tells me to repeat after her. I wouldn't mind, but I can't understand the words. When I ask her to repeat, she gets mad. You only care about your own writing, she screams. She doesn't believe poems produce oxygen like plants.
Certainly amazing. And one very important point about this book is, as we can see, is the diversity of the visions in the subject. The book is created with many different views, voices, and each in their own literary style, and that's the value of this book, certainly. And now, Pita Nash also, she was busy with her job. Unfortunately, she's not able to come. Now we go with Peter Taylor, who has been awarded for experimental war poetry, as far as I know. So Peter Taylor, and after that, we'll have a short commentary, literary comments from again, and then after that, we'll go for a short break. Peter Taylor.
I'm going to read from my earlier book, Trainer. This is my father's war. He died when I was 10, so I never had a chance to talk to him about it. But I had his flying logbook, and I reconstructed his experience and wrote a poem and a prose book about the experience of his generation. He was a flying officer with the RCAF and a fighter pilot with the Royal Navy. Icarus. He could just see in the pale vermilion light the small black speck under the clouds circling the perimeter. Its faint drone growing in pitch as it arcs eagerly towards the runway markers. His first, soloing. Approaching too fast, the nose lifts in the wind, levels and drops. Wheels bounce, but the wing pulls stubbornly at altitude, poised against the sun. The engine coughs, cartwheeling the frail gossamer wings as it strikes, disintegrating into earth. The engine, crumpling in its mount, shatters the canopy glass as hands lose their grip in the careening wreckage. A final gesture, bending the tail into a finger. Rolling into Union. I spent a week at the Department of History in Ottawa doing my research, and I wrote this after coming home on the train. Rolling into Union. You came this way, 3 decades past, and weary from the strict, dull habits of your war, hoping for an aunt's face or a mother's perfect smile. This great domed room, stone mason of her time, greeted you amid the brood of caps, buttons, rifles, newspaper, dull echoes of her son's returning. Father, photograph, target. You passed the mason tributes of these columns, kit bag and courage in hand to find yourself. Now I, myself returning, have found you. Port Hope. How strange to be flying with you. Hand gently on the stick, feet easing rudder into wind after all these years. My eyes following your eyes from instrument to horizon in a patch of warm sky. What kept us apart? 30 years and the world agony. What is left? Photographs, notes, hard knees, and poems made of flesh and torn aluminum. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. That was wonderful. And, you know, I guess I'll try to make a few remarks now so that later there won't be any big coda at the end. All those poems were just intensely beautiful, and they really do show. I knocked the recording device onto the floor. Okay. So and they all do show the great variety of approaches that we make to this, and I feel that that's tremendous because it shows poetry's freedom and resilience. We refer exactly to what we want to say, but on the other hand, we make it the way we want to make it, and we assert that freedom. And people are doing that with poetry in Iran, where their ability to do certain things with their bodies and their voices in the public square is restricted, you know. The situation in Iran has changed a lot since February when we gathered here, but it's continuous in a lot of ways. And I think that's one of the things that the poets get at, sort of the eternal nature of this situation, but incarnated in its particularity today. And the poem resembles that because it talks about something we all know, but everybody's voice broadcasts it or reforms it totally differently as it comes to her or him. So that's one of the things that impresses me very greatly about these poems. I want to point out that in the modern world, we've got certain surface events and certain underlying realities. And the underlying realities are not the deepest realities. Jacques Ellul uses the metaphor of an ocean. There's the things going on in the top. There's the currents and so forth, the strong, powerful things that go on in the depths, yes, but not the deepest depths. And in the deepest depths, there's a sort of eternal reality. And I think that the poet accesses all of those levels. When we look at that middle level, we see political things shift and change, but on the other hand, they remain the same. Not eternally, things remain eternally the same at the bottom, and things remain different day by day or instant to instant on the top. But in the middle, they remain there's an area of great currents, and they remain the same over planetary distances of time, right? And so we can see that certain things in Iran, you know, go back to like Cyrus the Great, you know, and other things maybe go back to, you know, the Paris Conference of 1919, and other things go back to our own recent times. And so if we look at the difference between the situation in January and February and the situation now, it seems completely different. Then protesters internally were trying to make a revolution in a sense. I don't think they wanted to fight, they wanted to make a voice that would change things and would get an answer and would put some pressure for sure. And they were met with terrible repression. Well, at the beginning, towards the end of that, well, it ended partly with an intervention from the US president, who said, go ahead and revolt, because if they do anything bad to you, they'll hear from me. Okay, so what happened? Nothing. People took some heart from that, and as a result, even more were killed. This is an evidence of not only lying and lack of care, but of complete stupidity, because available to this president was the very intelligent assessment of his own country's intelligence services, which said you cannot break the Iranian regime because it is willing to kill its own citizens on what is called in espionage terminology an industrial level. In other words, they don't care. They will kill as many as it takes to stay in power. If only 5 are left, the 5 who agree with them, they'll be fine with that. So what was done by the United States is not only criminal in indiscriminately bombing in ways that hit civilians from the air, but it's criminally stupid and uninformed, and represents not even its own administration being able to hear other parts of its own administration. In a sense, it knows this in part of itself, and in another sense, it acts without knowing it at all, right? So, so we're now facing a war that is based on this kind of stupidity, but alas, it's continuous with the old war. And I'll just read for you to wind up some points made by Albert Campbell, for whom I choose because his name is Albert, of course. One of the great Alberts. So these are words of his from 1946. Up to this point, I have refrained from appealing to emotion. We are being torn apart by a logic of history which we have elaborated, which he has been talking about. A net which threatens to strangle us. It is not emotion which can cut through the web of a logic which has gone to irrational lengths, but only reason which can meet logic on its own grounds. But I should not want to leave the impression that any program for the future can get along without our powers of love and indignation. I am well aware that it takes a powerful prime mover to get people into motion, and that it is hard to throw oneself into a struggle whose objectives are so modest, that is, just to be reasonable and peaceful with one another. So I think in a way, that's what poets have the cure of, the care the cure in the sense of a curate, that's our cure, that's our parish, to understand the paradoxical greater power of peace, and to understand that only peace is peace. To oppose violence with violence creates more violence, whatever your goal may be. Well, Campbell goes on to conclude. I'll just read another little piece for him. All I ask is that in the midst of a murderous world, I think of these words, unfortunately written 60 years ago. Camus is aware that this will be a long struggle. All I ask is that in the midst of a murderous world, we agree to reflect on murder and to make a choice. After that, we can distinguish those who accept the consequence of being murderers themselves, or the accomplices of murderers, and those who refuse to do so with all their force and being. Since this terrible dividing line does actually exist, it will be a gain if it be clearly marked. Over the expanse of 5 continents throughout the coming years, an endless struggle is going to be pursued between violence and friendly persuasion. A struggle in which, granted, the former has 1,000 times the chances of success compared to that of the latter. But I have always held that if the one who bases hopes on human nature is a fool, the one who gives up in the face of circumstances is a coward. And henceforth, the only honorable course will be to stake everything on a formidable gamble that words are more powerful than bullets. Thanks, everybody. Have a nice intermission. Great coffee and cookies back there. And Mansour will bring us back, or maybe he'll say a word now.
And I knew it was, I didn't have my skull on the table, I have to get that. But I knew that time was moving along quickly. So I have a working title for this one, and I hope you like it. 2026, April 25. 67 years, 3 months and 5 days since I came crying into this world. Today, just another day. Tears are streaming down my face. Thinking about all the innocent souls dying in Iran or Israel or Gaza or Ukraine or Russia and all over the world. The blood never stops spilling, turning the streets and fields and rivers red. As shell-shocked as my grandfather after the First World War, or my uncle returning home to Canada, unhinged after the Korean War. Tears raining down my face, mourning, nameless and forsaken and forgotten dead. All dying in the name of God, according to a handful of men with power. On days like these, when I'm feeling down, I think of you, Mahsa Amini. On that summer day 4 years ago, risking your life by defying the authorities, throwing away your hijab fearlessly, letting your naked hair flow freely in the breeze, your heart unshackled at last, racing in joy, leading the way for your sisters and brothers to follow. Massa, you're on my mind and in my heart, touching my soul with your soul, bringing a smile to my face again. I will never forget you.
So Mark McAlister, I just call you as a friend.
Well, I can't imagine a better introduction. Wow. I've known Mansour for a couple of years now, and just talk about a friend. He's opened my eyes to lots of things. I think one of the reasons I'm very grateful to be part of this project, without going into detail, it's given me such inspiration in my own community work in Richmond Hill, where everything is kind of on the surface, everything's okay, everybody's fine, we talk about things, but you could feel underneath there's all this anxiety, pain, hatred, shit going on, but people don't know how to talk about it. And this group has been very helpful going back now into my community and figuring out how you can sort of open things up a bit. The poem in the book is called Bullets and Words, and this is sort of a follow-up poem called After Bullets. So much passion, conviction, desperate resolve for a better world. Ideas, monies, trip, studies, fellowship, faith, dialogue, research, think tanks, more money. Words, just so many words. Like a noisy traffic jam, words buzz around you that shake your skin, howl and scream till you pay attention, then shatter and scatter in a nanosecond. Now, you discover that these phantoms are not in fact words, just shells left over from something long ago. You remember what once lived in your heart. You give it a nudge. Ripples, eddies, a full-blown surf rolls through your body. Words swell up. Healing words, crying out for attention. And where will they land?
And where they land? Who can answer? Brenda Clews.
So I actually did write, can we move this so I can maybe be in front or, although there's that, right?
That's fine.
Yeah. I was really hesitant and resistant to writing anything on Iran because I'm not Iranian, I have no family or friends there, and there are so many brilliant Iranian poets of the Persian tradition. But I've written something because I don't know, anyway, I'm just going to read it. It's called A Wounded Nation, December 2025 to April 2026, Iran. Who am I to write of Iran? Iran, the slaughter, assault guns fire, da, da, da. Fate falling like severed echoes, writhing, screaming, minted psychopaths, the Revolutionary Guard, your brothers, sisters, friends, spies for the West, enemies. Screams vanish before they are heard in the thousands. Streets bloody, torture behind iron doors. Survivors flicker, escape across the border, grainy cell phone videos of horror. They marched for peace, equality, free air. Carnage, mass graves, nearly a whole generation swallowed into the earth, gone. A country in mourning. We across the world numb, unbelieving. The century sags, splits under the largest mass killing of unarmed civilians by their own government. Israeli and US bombs fall on rulers, infrastructure, nuclear sites, military depots, and too many schools. Kapow, boom, kapow, boom. Pray topple the regime. Iranian drones bomb thudding Israel and US military bases carved into Gulf sand. War spreads a widening circle. My distant air without acrid smoke of pulverized brick, buildings of dead and suffering bodies. I hold a shroud, an image of a hijab, feel a land I don't know, carry horror, memories not mine, and see terror in my friends' Iranian eyes, torment, fury, sorrow, and lament in their poetry. If words are to defeat bullets, truth must be spoken. Iran is a gashed, cut, severed spirit floating over its bleeding and bombed land. Desperate shadows suffocate the people, live in the bones of the cage that imprisons Iran. I have to stop writing. My chest heaves with tears. Why? Why should the good, honorable suffer? Lives fodder for the ruling class, dictators in a deathly bobbing row. One falls, another pops up, a ghastly circus game specter. I search the map, gaze at landmass contours, the Strait of Hormuz, barrage of ships held back as global oil prices rise, a stock market's ocean pulled by a bloodied moon. Smug oil gods withhold crude, plug the shipping route, black gold threads through everything. Our greasy addiction, burning fuels, love of plastic, enabling a theocratic nightmare, a rule of terror. A country's light turned off, dark silence where filaments of connection were lit. An Iranian intranet claws the country. The official channel blasts propaganda and runs the schools. My friend's family in Iran, 1-minute phone calls out. We're safe. The skies are black with bombed oil and we can't breathe. Bombs are falling, but we're okay. We're still here. We're eating, yes. We stay home. Mom and Dad are frail, but safe. We love you, we love you. And what when the calls stop? Iran, now a military dictatorship, harsher lives loom. I don't see the killing, or hide fearful at home, or feel percussive fear as bombs hit, but my heart sorrows. Weep for Iran. Pray for Iran. Rising, somehow rising, flowering, free, proud, a nation's poetry, its soul intact.
And now she ready.
My poem is not about an Iranian, it's about the great Turkish poet Nazim Hikmet. And you might say, well, why? Why on this occasion? Because I think it's important to understand that you can have pain being in exile, being in self-exile, being out of the sympathy and understanding of your government that you once supported. Nazim Hikmet had a hybrid origin. He wasn't pure Turkish, as he was fond of pointing out. He was Turkish on his father's side, but more Caucasian on his mother's side. And he, of course, became a communist, which put him out of favor immediately with the Turkish government. He was married more than once, and he wrote syllabic poetry, but then, of course, went to free verse. He spent a number of years imprisoned until he was pardoned because of international pressure, but he did die outside Turkey. So this poem tries to capture some of the feeling of exile, and it's called Hikmet in Exile. Thick-voiced mountain horsemen slash the sun's throat, spilling crimson into a lake. Even winter cuts like a silver knife. What is real is life, doomsday ordained, time flowing red from a child's throat. But you are better than those who carry prison within themselves. Cloud-driven, you defer age, blue eyes gleaming, red mustache twitching to the Rubaiyat you compose. Tchaikovsky on a cello, past wives remembered, bondage and freedom. Your red apple heart juiced by the most distant stars. Light filters into you as you pick olives, their leaves the loveliest of green. Cherished tobacco, hazelnuts, Amalzier apples, pomegranate seeds, melons cooled in wells, cheese pizza with sesame seed, the smell of geranium on your fingers. Your grief in penal solitude, the silent hostility of a closed door, lasts more than a year, more than a century. The sun flashing off and on, people dying for the same bread, the same dream. Your heart beating to the pulse of distant stars feels the sadness of an empty shell. Your country groaning under the heels of rampaging thugs. Your hand on a wife's flesh in the mind, light flooding her hair, slipping through your fingers. You want the right of life, the right of the leopard ready to spring, the right of the first man. If you could only have one more hour in Istanbul, who knows at this moment which executioner stalks you? Who knows at this moment which ghost, etc., and so on. Exile is never an easy art to master, but you are ready to die as easily as birds. Your muse already taken to blue vacancies, full of glittering discs.
To be quick, John Arthur.
Thank you. As we all know, there's a lot of conflict and tension in the world, even between Canada and the United States. So I'm going to share a little example of international collaboration. This chapbook came out in November. It's an ekphrastic collection. Ekphrastic means writing about visual art. that I did with an artist and writer in Atlanta, and there were no tariffs involved in this. So I'm going to read a poem from this called Seabirds. You can't really see the drawing, it's quite small, but there's a bird coming down into the waves and crossing bills with what appears to be another bird in the ocean, except when you look carefully at the other bird, it's half fish. So I wrote this, and there's some sort of marginal notes of things I thought about while I was writing this poem, and they're on the side, so I'll just signal those like this. Seabirds, a dream image rendered by Gustave Doré's great-granddaughter, rolling waves, crested lines, a cloud-edged full moon. In a vision, W.B. Yeats' mystical system, phase 15, the full moon, represents a fully subjective state, and people of the greatest beauty are born on or near this phase. Two seabirds cross long, sharp bills like fencing foils. Are they fighting, or one feeding the other, following an age-old avian ritual? The bird on top breasts the waves, her wings a swept-back arc. The bird below is almost submerged, only his head above the waves. Albatrosses spend several years without touching land, eating and sleeping on the ocean. Effortless gliders, they can sleep while flying, wings and feathers locked. Perhaps they dreamed this drawing. I see wing fins, a fishtail. Is this bird becoming fish, or a fish turning bird? Its flying mate explaining how to bill cross and kiss. A second, smaller moon, half shrouded in clouds. I wonder which planet we are on. Perhaps I should be asking which eon. It was a common superstition among seafaring men that seabirds such as the gull and albatross held the souls of drowned sailors. In all my long years, only one moon has winked her silvery eye at me. This drawing feels like a forgotten fairy tale in which birds cross bills, teaching frightened children morals. Legend has it that a mother pelican would feed her chicks on blood from her own chest if there was not enough food to feed them. The pelican, therefore, became a Christian symbol of mercy and self-sacrifice. No sanitized Disney tale, something darker and wilder, a seabird's version of Strufelpetter, where Taylor snips off children's sucked thumbs, a Grimm Brothers tale teaching the danger of leaving shore for the wild sea. You never know what's out there. Thank you.
And now Strom. He will share some news about Ali Asadullahi and Ali Reza Adine, who were released from the prison of Iranian regime, and he will read some pieces of them. Thank you, Sai. Please.
Thank you very much. But Mansour, in fact, I have word from Ali Asadullahi, but not Ali Reza Adine. I don't know about his case. I hope he's been released and free. But yes, I have some very happy news to read out for you before I traumatize you further. This is an email written by just this week that Banu Zan and I received from Ali Asadullahi, who's in Iran. You'll hear more about him in a moment. And the subject line here is finally connected, 3 exclamation marks, gratitude from Ali Asadullahi. Dear Sain Banu, Iran's internet was cut for 2 full months. No connection, no way to reach anyone, no way to say what was in my heart. Now that it's finally back, this is the first thing I wanted to write. I want to thank you for standing with me during my 50 days in confinement. I learned after my release that you had spoken out, that you had used your voices as poets and as free human beings to defend mine. That knowledge came to me like light in a place where I'd forgotten light existed. You didn't have to, but you did, and that makes all the difference. What you did, especially as part of a community that understands silencing, is not something I will ever forget. Together, you reminded me that even in total isolation, I was not alone. I'm sorry this letter comes so late. The 2-month silence was not mine. It was the walls around me, and then the broken wires of the internet. But gratitude does not expire. I look forward to the day we can meet, share poems, and build something stronger than what tried to break us. Until then, please know that your solidarity is carved into me. With deepest respect and warmth, Ali Asadalahi. Reading this out to you sounds vainglorious on my part, so I will have to say, Banu Zen and I did very little. When we found out, we had been in contact with him regarding an essay that he was writing. He was writing at the time, shortly before the events in Iran. And so we found out about his case. We were in touch with PEN America, in fact, in this case. We found out that PEN America was sponsoring him and others and looking into Ali Asadalahi's case. I haven't even introduced him yet, really. He's an award-winning, acclaimed young poet in Iran and translator, an essayist, and an activist. You'll find out more later. All that Banu and I did was research his case, try to raise his voice a little bit, and with the indulgence of of PEN America, we were allowed to co-sign a petition, or rather a manifesto, I suppose, signed by a list of international literary luminaries, which doesn't include me, and unfortunately doesn't yet include Banu. Now, I don't know about Ali Reza Adinez's case. You'll hear about him later. And with your indulgence, I'll reprise the readings I did from this podium last February. Unlike others at this podium today, I'm not a poet. At least no line of poetry I have written has been attributed to me. I'm an editor. Along with the well-known poet, Banu Zen, I'm co-editor of the international poetry anthology Woman, Life, Freedom, Poems for the Iranian Revolution, in its 3rd printing now. Some of the poets, 2 of the poets I know, whose poems are included in this anthology are here hosting us in this room today. Mansour Noorbakhsh and Mahdi Ganjavi. And thank you. The poets in this anthology live on 4 different continents. 3 brave poets in the anthology live in Iran: Ali Asadalahi, Ali Reza Adineh, and Dawood Bayat. They asked to be published under their own names. These writers live openly as free citizens under a violent dictatorship, and they're not afraid for their names and their thoughts to be known. I admire them deeply. That is why I requested permission initially and repeated this request to read their words here and not my own. A précis of my reading from this past February appears in Where Words Defeat Bullets, but I had no permission, of course, to republish their own words. It's simply a précis. Now, Ali Reza Adineh, a poet, writer, and visual artist, was born in 1974. He's a current board member of the Iranian Writers Association, a banned organization. In about 3 decades, he has published 5 poetry books. Ali Reza, as far as I know, was imprisoned during the Woman Life Freedom protest. He was imprisoned, rather, during the Woman Life Freedom protests. According to reports, he was again taken into custody in January of 2026. I don't know his fate right now. But you've heard from Ali Asadalahi. He is out for the time being. Now, PEN America is still looking into his case, sponsoring him, and publicizing his case because he's out on bail right now, and he will be taken into custody once again to be sentenced, possibly tried. And he was awarded just recently the Barbie Award, the Barbie Freedom to Write Award by PEN America. as a means of raising his profile and attempting to protect him with that part of Penn's operations. Now, Ali, a poet, essayist, and translator, as you've heard, is the author of 6 Persian poetry books, and he's widely known and respected. His poems and translations have appeared in many English language journals. He was imprisoned during the Woman Life Freedom protests, and again was arrested violently on the night of January 24th, 2026. For 2 months or longer, the government-imposed communications shutdown in Iran prevented us from knowing his status. In fact, there was one report, I can't verify it, that he was rearrested and transferred along with other prisoners to a military site where we imagine that they were meant to be human shields during the bombing of Iran. Or victims, actually, of the bombing, perhaps, if that were to happen. So, Ali Asadolahi translated Ali Reza Adinez and Dawood Bayat's poems into English for our anthology, this one. And it is he whom Banu and I were in contact with. So last summer, Ali wrote an essay for publication and he shared a draft with us. The essay hasn't yet been published, and the excerpts that I'm about to read here, once again, may not be in their final form. I will first read Ali Asadolahi's own words, and I'll then read his translation of Ali Reza Adinez's difficult poem, Our Protest's Reality. Excerpts from the unpublished essay, quote, "The Echoes in My Cell, a witness's reading of Woman, Life, Freedom," by Ali Asadolahi, a draft current in the summer of 2025. A solitary cell is an education in the architecture of silence. For 30 nights, the Iranian state subjected me to this compulsory learning. In that profound isolation, where the world is reduced to 4 walls and the frantic pulse in your own ears, language becomes a lifeline. Memory rebuilds the vanished streets, and the echoes of chanted slogans become a private liturgy. In that crucible, poetry is not a luxury, it is an act of survival. The editors of Woman, Life, Freedom, Poets for the Iranian Revolution, understand this alchemy perfectly, noting in their introduction that when a struggle is waged, quote, "the art remains as witness and testimonial," unquote. Their commitment to the power of the work itself is underscored by their editorial process. All submissions were read blind, ensuring that the voice, not the reputation, was paramount. This collection is an archive of screams and whispers, a testament I read, not as a detached critic, but as a witness who's been unmade and remade by its truths. As a translator in this collection, this moral imperative to tell the whole complex truth guided my own contribution. I felt it was my duty to present 2 pillars of the revolution's reality, which is why I chose to translate 2 seemingly contradictory poems. The first was Ali Reza Adinez's Our Protest's Reality. In direct contrast, I chose Dawood Bayat's The Name. This poem possesses a sacramental power, exploring how the name of one woman, Jina Masa Amini, can transcend her physical death to become a symbol, a sacred password. If Adinez's poem is the broken body of the revolution, Bayat's is its unconquerable soul. Together, these truths, the visceral and the symbolic, the defiant and the grieving, the self-critical and the universally hopeful, form the heart of this collection. Dedicated simply to the martyrs of freedom, this is a memorial to a revolution that, not a memorial to a revolution that was, but a living testament to a revolution that is. The names will be said, the ugly realities will be witnessed, and the echoes from ourselves will continue to reverberate until they become the anthem of a free Iran. It is a tribute to the enduring spirit of all who have been caught in this struggle, including my sister Anisha Asadolahi, who is in prison for her fight for freedom and equality, has not had a single day of leave in 2 years, and has spent 110 days in solitary confinement. I'll interrupt for a moment. I believe that she is now out of prison. again, I can't confirm that. Ali continues and concludes, I hope that one day when she is free, she will see this book and these words and know that her fight for her ideals was not in vain. The words of Ali Asadolahi. Now, the poem I'm about to read is a terrible poem. Terrible, as I said, in February, in an older meaning of this word. It evokes powerful emotions in its listeners. If you know the language of the English version of the Bible, you may know that God is called terrible, not bad, but powerful, awe-inspiring, frightening. Many of the poems in this volume are delicate, lyrical, contemplative, and picturesque. This poem is not. Here is what Ali Asadolahi writes about it. Quote, it is a brutal confrontational piece of anti-poetry, an act of iconoclasm against the cheap grace of martyrdom. That's hard to assimilate, it's hard for us to take in. You will not forget its words once you hear them. It's a poem for terrible times. Our Protest Reality by Alireza Adina and translated by Ali Asadolahi. Not only blood, shit spreads too after you're shot. It's not always like this, that a bullet pierces the body and blood spatters, or hits a neck and you shout, oh look, his neck just bloomed. It's mostly shitty. That's why out of every 1,000 names, only one's given out. There's got to be a clean carcass on everyone's lips. I've buried a sheep's guts myself. I know. Makes you vomit, let alone a man's gut. It turns yellow under the body. From the holes in the intestine, just wind comes out. The foul wind. Not that nice smelling wind, you know. No, but the wind blowing from a hole in the gut. Not only blood. I saw someone killed in a protest, and for 2 hours he was farting. People were laughing. This video can't be released. If it's released, it's not just the stench that breaks out, it's the people's laughter. And when there's laughing, you can't fuck the coup d'etat regime in the ass. So it can't be released. That's why they tell the snipers to shoot at the gut. Clean death comes on the airwaves. But there are always more dead, more dirty death, more killed than they announce. That's Alireza Adina and Ali Asadolahi.
Thank you, Sai. Thank you. It was very, very important part of this book and also the book Women Back Freedom, and also this book, Rewards Between Poets, and thank you for sharing those with us. Now, Mahdi Ganjavi, the director of Asemana, will read a short poem, and after that, Al will share the comments with us, and we conclude the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. It's a pity that war is one of those goods that once sold cannot be returned. You can only keep it in your house, take it with you to work, carry it to bed, and invite it into your dreams. You cannot put it out on Wednesdays with the garbage. If you want, you can play with it, but be careful not to become war's debris yourself. The municipality has strictly forbidden its recycling. You may take it to the rallies of its supporters, it grows fatter. Take it to the rallies of its opponents, its mouth splits wide open. The post office won't accept it either, a fragile label won't help. War is a device that wherever you put it makes the house smaller. At the dinner table, it sits between the spoon and the bread. On the bus, it takes the seat of the elderly. In the park, instead of a tree, it digs a hole and plants the park in it. And slowly it grows so large that it fits neither in the house nor in the city. That is when the city itself is folded into war's drawer. Thank you very much.
To me, one of the, maybe the essential fact outside of the poems themselves that we encounter in this event, this multifaceted event that is now extended over 2 readings with many, many people, the publication of a book which is supported by and supports a whole publishing house, you know, a complex reality that we've helped to create or have participated in, and yet which is a unified thing. This, to me, one of the bedrock things about it is what Sy and others have just emphasized, that what we can say and feel that we want to condemn ourselves or at least minimize ourselves for being elsewhere, not directly suffering, not able very well to add help with your own hand. The words are deeply appreciated by other people. It's my firm belief that everything is alive. So I assimilate this to our relationship as human beings to the sheep and the rocks and the clouds. They do what they can as they are created. But we have a particular ability to communicate and to get together with them and with each other. But it's not perfect. We too cannot just fix things by mental contact or even by speech. But yet it is very powerful. It's not everything, but it's not nothing. And the people who suffer, even while they suffer, and there's no one there to help them, still seem to remember to the last possible moment that someone said something to them, heard them, right? And that's an essence of humanity. That's like an underground stream. That's a artery and vein that we all share. Anyway, this is my hope. This is my faith. This might be me patting myself on the back when I'm here safe and happy, and others are suffering elsewhere. I'll just say, I think about this all the time and always have, ever since I was a little kid. And part of my poem from last time was the poem Powerlessness.
Just to note,
how many times have I written the following poem? Oh, terrible astonishment. I am here, while the sufferer is there, with me, but over there. How many more times will I write it? And then in a way, the end of the second part of that poem contradicts it a little bit. Yesterday, maybe today, trucks carried the body bags to Bog-i-Reshvan Cemetery in Iskov. While here, we are charged with making from our ease some adequate normalcy, some beauty, that these who now are dead and dying to be free, to live in justice, can hear of and seem to see a world kin to their struggles, a good that can be. So I want to write a moral for this afternoon and this whole effort that Mansour and Mahdi and so many others have created, which is, yes, let's try to live our own life worthily so that it isn't an image of consumerism and distraction, but an image of a noble possible existence that many people are restricted from, but they live nobility in pain and repression. But that's only a nobility that hopes for a noble normalcy, and that's our job. And the height of noble normalcy would be poetry.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. Unfortunately, we need to leave the space in 5 minutes. So, but gladly they gave us some extra 30 minutes to listen. Thanks, Mansour Jan, and thank you all for joining us today. And any of the contributors, in case they haven't received their contributor copy, they come and we will get them.
I'm not to.